Hi everyone. Sorry about the delay.
Welcome.
All right, we'll just get right to it then. Thanks for your patience, everybody. My name is Angelica Dongallo. I'm the program assistant in Cal Humanities San Francisco office, and we'd like to welcome you to today's Community Stories Enrichment webinar, utilizing social media to enhance your message and create new relationships. Cal Humanities is offering this enrichment webinar to help community stories, grantees, and applicants to formulate marketing strategies and to identify core audiences. The session will include a look at how grassroots marketing, traditional media, and new technologies can be combined to create a successful brand for your project and your organization. The webinar will include case studies and a Q&A period. The webinar will be approximately 1.5 hours in length, so if you need to leave early, please know that you'll be able to access a recording via email and also our Cal Humanities YouTube channel shortly. Before we get started, I just wanted to review a few housekeeping items and let you know how you can participate in today's webinar. You'll have the opportunity to ask questions as we go along, but since we have a large group and little time, questions won't be answered until the Q&A periods at the end of each section of the presentation. And you can ask questions by using the question box on the side of your screen. So please type your questions there and we'll be able to address them. Thank you, and I'll turn the program now over to Felicia Kelly, the Senior Program Officer in Cal Humanities LA office.
Okay, thanks Angelica, and hi everyone. Thanks for joining us for this special webinar on the subject of marketing and communication. This is the second in a series of enrichment webinars planned as a benefit for Cal Humanities Community Stories grantees and applicants that we're going to be organizing and hosting. We hope you'll find this information presented today useful to your work. The topic for this webinar was selected in response to the interest expressed by many of our project directors and applicants in learning more about how to enhance their project outreach and audience development plans. Generally speaking, marketing and outreach are often underdeveloped parts of the funding proposals we receive, as well as within the broader field of public humanities work. We hope that this webinar will make a contribution to strengthening our capacities to reach and engage wider audiences in more effective ways. This webinar has been planned to help project directors implement and manage their projects more effectively, as well as to reach the longer-term goal of strengthening the field. By recording and making this session available on our website to grant seekers and other interested individuals, we hope to accomplish those goals. If you're participating in the live webcast, please be sure to let us know your thoughts about the session today by responding to the survey link you'll be sent following the webinar. If you're listening to the recording, we welcome your feedback as well. Before we begin the presentation, I want to quickly remind everyone that Cal Humanities is an independent nonprofit organization whose mission is to connect Californians to ideas and to one another in order to understand our shared heritage and diverse cultures, inspire civic participation, and shape our future. Since 1975, we've supported and developed a wide range of work, including community-based history programs, youth programs, statewide reading and discussion projects, and Academy Award-winning documentary films and other media. Cal Humanities is an independent state partner of the National Endowment for the Humanities, which provides a stable base of core funding. Our main office is in San Francisco with a satellite office here in Los Angeles. The Community Stories Grants Program, formerly the California Story Fund, is a competitive grant program that supports community-centered, story-based projects that contribute to our evolving understanding of California, past and present. Since 2003, we've supported over 400 projects that document the California experience, highlighting the stories of community members. The stories these projects have shared collectively show the incredible geographic, ethnic, and cultural variety of California. The projects have employed a wide range of formats or media, including interpretive exhibits, murals, short film and radio documentaries, plays and performances based on stories along with presentations, panel discussions, and community conversations. Many projects have achieved significant results and received favorable attention and recognition. The next application deadline for community stories will be February 18th, 2014, with awards announced in June. You can find program guidelines, application materials, recordings of information sessions, project descriptions and experiences, and other useful information on our website here at this link. If you have any questions about the program or how to apply for funds, please feel free to contact me. Okay, now I'd like to introduce Patric Stillman, who will be leading the session today. Patric is one of our veteran Community Stories project directors. He'll be sharing some information about some of his projects with you later in the webinar, and has provided leadership to nonprofit organizations in San Francisco, Los Angeles, and San Diego. As a technology instructor, Patric has led a series of webinars for historians and librarians throughout North America on topics of digital storytelling, building online communities, and marketing strategies using new technologies. He has developed several successful video programs, including California the Past, which explores the state's history from first-person narrative, and People's Post, which instructs teens in how to become citizen journalists using smartphones. Patric is currently acting as a technology mentor to San Diego's Ray Street artists and is chair of the San Diego Film Consortium Foundation. We're grateful to Patric for working with us to develop and present this webinar and appreciate his willingness to share his knowledge and experience with other project directors in the broader field. Thank you, Patric. It's all yours.
Thank you very much. And thank you, of course, to everyone who's attending today. I appreciate your patience as we worked out some technical difficulties at the start. Throughout the presentation today, I encourage you to ask questions. You should find that on your control panel. And then there's also a chat section, which you can communicate non-questions. And thirdly, there'll be times when I ask a question. And so why don't we start with that and see if that's working for everybody. So my first question today is, what is your primary focus at your organization? How many of you focus on marketing? Check the marketing box. If you are project-based, doing project management, check that one. And we'll come back to see what the results are as we continue on. So to successfully remain relevant in today's world means that in addition to doing good works, that we also learn to navigate the tools of technology. And so before we start off today, I'd like to discuss digital immigrants and digital natives. So for those of us who are older than most of today's technologies, the first point is that we can't afford to generally put all technologies into the same virtual box and say, oh, that's not important to me. I don't get it, and I don't need it. To remain competitive and to keep in sync with the world around us, we need to embrace that world, which now requires lifelong learning centered around technology. What you knew a decade ago may or may not hold relevance today. If you're looking to use today's technology, then I suggest you start with something that interests you, spend some time at it, and grow at your own pace. You may not need to become a full-fledged computer programmer, but you do need to understand the strengths and weaknesses of the different tools that are available to you and use them to get the best end result. The second point I would like to make is that we need to understand that technology use has some generational boundaries. My parents, for example, would be considered digital immigrants, as they were born before the existence of digital technology. At 50, my generation is sometimes referred to as digital native because we lived during or after the general introduction of digital technologies. And through interacting with digital technology from an early age, we have a greater understanding of its concepts. Though the truth is that when I entered the workforce, the only technology at hand was maybe a typewriter at my desk. Computers, fax machines, and copiers were not really affordable and used at most small businesses. This is great contrast to the third group, digital natives, that grew up knowing technology in every aspect of their lives. And this includes groups that you may have heard of called millennials or even Generation Z. Each of these three groups, which is the digital immigrants and then the two digital natives, relate to technology differently. So we want to keep this in mind as we move into our discussion of identifying our audiences. My parents barely lived in a world where communicating by email or shopping online, let me say that again, my parents barely live in a world where communicating through technology such as emails or shopping online, those things might become part of their daily lives, but not much more. My generation certainly couldn't live without a computer in their home. We use it for a lot of things to get us from point A to point B. While the younger digital natives, they've already primarily moved on to mobile platforms like smartphones and tablets. And these are the types of things that we need to keep in mind as we consider who they are. So for those of us who are older than most of today's technologies, we need to understand that we can't afford to generally put all technology into the same virtual box. And we need to take a look at understanding our audiences so we know how they are utilizing technology today. When you submit a grant or a letter of interest, you always get asked the same basic questions, right? Who are you? Who is your organization? What are you trying to accomplish? Who are you trying to engage? What partnerships have you already developed? And so forth. These concepts may be equally applied to how you approach your social marketing strategy. You need to ask yourself, what are your goals? And attempt to define several concrete, measurable objectives. In this case, your goals probably are specifically geared towards your community story projects. Who is telling the stories and who is hearing them are integral to your project mission. So we want to start off by identifying our audience. Are we preaching to the choir? Are we seeking to speak to communities outside of our target audience? Who are those individuals that we are trying to reach? And then we need to consider what social media platforms do we think they're using? How can we engage in them with a technology that's suited for their generational level? What is unique about your approach to the message? What's the hook? Why are these stories important? Whenever you actually sit down to communicate ideas, whether it's a press release or a video story or something that's in a longer format like a book or a longer press release, you need to say and identify who it is you're speaking to and understand who's going to be receiving the information. So you really need to consider how you're placing your message to fit that audience. And as we discussed, the different generational platforms will also use the technologies differently. So I highly encourage you to consider keeping up with technological reports, news articles, using whatever resources you might have in front of you. So maybe it's your computer and you are setting up some news feeds to show up into your email box or showing up online on your search engine. Or if you're using mobile platforms, you might want to use something like Zite or any other of these apps that are taking news that's happening on the web and pushing them to you. This way you'll get more familiar with actually what's happening in the world around you and how people are using that technology. And as with anything, your social marketing plan should probably include some sort of way to regularly monitor yourself. whether it's weekly, monthly, or quarterly. If you're not checking to see what's happening and what's being successful, you're not really growing or learning how you can reach people outside of your normal audiences. So being a good writer knows that you need to know your audience. We tell stories to a specific audience and how to define who that audience is. So what I usually do to start off is I ask myself, who is my target audience? And the task that I will create for myself is to perhaps create a profile or maybe 2 or 3 profiles of who I think that audience is. I'll even go so far as to make up a name or give that person a description. So maybe I'm trying to reach soccer moms. That would be very different than if I'm trying to reach educators. And I'll come up with a name, description, an age, determine maybe what their career is, if they have family, where they live, what their education is, and their interests. So using this imagination, we create a profile, and then we start to understand what they talk like, what their values are, how they communicate to each other, what's important, and so forth. And that's really key to fine-tuning your message to reach that target. And then the second question I'll ask myself is, where is that audience? So where are they physically, and what do they do? We need to understand, are they down the block? Are they across the world? Are they congregating in schools or community centers? Where are they, and what are they doing there? So one of the best ways to get that information is to actually go out into the world and talk to the community. Visit those places if it's possible, and seek out what's relevant to them. And a great way to do that is to use virtual search social networks and see what's trending and what information is capturing people's imagination. It doesn't matter if this is not specifically tied to the project or the work that you're doing, but it's a better way to understand the community and what they're interested in. And maybe at some point you'll be able to tie the two together. So what are their existing key influences? So as you get to know that community, take note of what's getting their attention, and also if anybody is successfully making it through this community and reaching out to them. Perhaps there's somebody through TED Talks or a celebrity or a well-known writer or even another organization that's doing a really good job at reaching that audience. Take note of how they do it and what their speciality is in reaching them. It's also good to identify the source of communication that that community is getting. Newspapers, magazines, event calendars, social media, community leaders. Who are they listening to? Where are they getting their sources of information that they want to talk about? So on this page you'll see a lot of tools that are available online to better understand your community when they're not close at hand. And in fact, many of these are actually related to Twitter. So how do you successfully engage with this community? I think the good task would be to engage in conversations by introducing content they're already interested in. Use their language, be real, ask questions, subscribe to the blogs, and join their networks. Don't stop at Facebook and Twitter, because that does not make a social marketing strategy. That's like saying that you read a magazine article and that's the basis of your entire research. Be thoughtful and use existing resources such as the ones listed here. What valuable contributions can you make to this audience? How can you make that impact? And what keywords and phrases can help them find you? We often stay within our comfort zone, right? And we focus on the work at hand. And, you know, maybe, for example, I'll be so into the project that I'm managing, I forget to think about the audience and what they're doing when they're not focused on what is driving me on a day-to-day basis. In a way, you have to almost become an expert, and you have to look outside your box. Twitter grows in its importance in the social media world, and yet I know that many of us shy away from it. It's not always user-friendly. But the only way to really figure out Twitter or any other social network is really to jump in, learn the terminology if necessary, read some articles online, and get in there and explore. It's also very important that you don't give up. You need to regularly engage with others. For myself, I often gravitate to Facebook, but I use other social media networks as well. And what I do is I make sure to check in at least once a day, and that keeps that regular flow of information going on. Some people, of course, get mesmerized by it and will be like connected virtually all the time. That's probably not a very healthy thing to do because you need to be able to focus on other things, and you need to fine-tune and target that relationship and marketing effort. There are some interesting things, though, to see how people are utilizing marketing and marketing strategies. And it is important to know that many Facebook users are spending up to 6.5 hours every month on social networking. Instagram has over 150 million active users. 15% of all people on the internet are using Pinterest. And actually, Pinterest is kind of an interesting thing because it's one of the few very successful ways for people utilizing that social media to connect back to your website. I think I read a statistic that Pinterest is driving twice the amount of website referrals than Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google Plus combined. And so that's a really interesting thing. You always want to get people who are utilizing social media to go to your website to get to the core of the information and your message. And Pinterest seems to be very successful in doing that. And for those of you who don't know, Pinterest is a sort of like pinning a bulletin board, and it's very visual. So people who come across things that like pictures are creating sort of folders with images. And then people click on that, it drives it back to the main website. Social media is the top driver for relationship building and brand engagement these days. And it's even more important than email or, you know, expanding your corporate websites. Right now, 52% of nonprofits and corporations are saying that people find them. I have to rephrase that. Corporations and nonprofits are saying that half of their efforts are actually coming from social media, and then those people are reaching their messages, as opposed to emails have dropped down to 25% effectiveness, and just having a website is dropping down to about 10% effectiveness. So it's really important that you engage in social media and that you expand your use of what's available on the web. We truly are in a time period where lifelong learning is where it's at. You can't stop. You need to be curious and expand your knowledge. And so, as I've mentioned on this page here, we see Google Trends, which will tell you what's trending. Same thing with Trender. That means what are people talking about the most, and those are the things that your audience are interested in. QuantCast gives you information on the audience themselves. Some of those questions we were asking about who our audience is would come from that. Technorati is telling you what's the hottest blogs that people are interested in. You know, even on television we see on some of these reality shows hot bloggers, you know, people that are influencing millions of people are showing up. And I know I often go, who is that? But the world today, we're getting information by, you know, people telling us what's hot or things that are gravitating our attention are being pulled into focus, for better or for worse. And so some of these other ones that we see here, Dan Zarella, We Follow, Twello, Blast Follow, these are things that are all talking about what's happening right now. What are those influential individuals tweeting about? Place Blogger is actually giving us more information on geotags and telling us where our audiences are located. And of course, things that we might be more familiar with, headline news, top viral videos, our RSS feeds and hashtags are also directing traffic and giving people a sense of understanding who our community is. So remember how we established our goals and objectives? So pretend for a moment who you think will make the ideal team to be impactful. Okay, we might not have those bloggers and that in-house and helping us to define who our community is locally or who we want to reach through the internet, but we can make a wish list, and we can, for a second, just dream and break out who we think should be involved. Who do we know, and who can we get to? And this is wishful time, and so we should be bold. Think about, you know, who can really champion our cause and capture people's imagination. Who's that individual that could be the face of our message? Is it a local celebrity, a politician, a journalist? They all make great visible champions. Once you have that wish list, make a plan and think about how could you possibly reach out to them. Sometimes you might have people on a list that you can't get to because it's a wish list, but you might be able to find that someone in your office or someone involved in your project knows somebody who knows somebody, and you shouldn't overlook those opportunities. And this is one way to sort of discuss it and to figure out how to identify someone who can champion your cause or help you improve your marketing. So make a plan is the best way to reach out to them. You know, you never want to just send a blanket email out to the world. Person-to-person tactics are always more successful. And keep at it. There's a lot to be said for tenacity. Remember, you have to open the door. Asking for help is the first step. And when you do so, don't be vague. Give details of what you're expecting in terms of time and commitment, and have your messages refined so that you can be direct and thorough. The elevator speech is always a good thing to have prepared when you go out to to speak with these individuals you've identified, and keeping your message on point is important. Now then, you can bring together all your experts and start a solid grassroots marketing plan. If you're a marketing guru and want to incorporate a strategic viral marketing campaign, go for it. But I'm assuming that most of us wear so many different hats that it's probably best just to keep your ideas simple, inexpensive, and targeted. Some grassroots marketing ideas that you may want to consider are product samplings, creative promotions, product placement, community partner tables at government or nonprofit events, participation giveaways, creating social events, and of course random acts of kindness. If you have physical real estate, edgy window displays, nighttime projections or TV screens, and even a blow-up character at the door or on your rooftop. These are some really fun grassroots marketing ideas that you can incorporate. And if you're really creative, you might want to try the surprise campaign, guerrilla style. Activists, social and political activists are really good at this. I've seen chalk drawings on sidewalks by ATMs, yarn bombings on street signs, flash mobs at farmers market. One of my favorites that I came across this year here in San Diego was the men's chorus, who were welcoming San Diego's new arts and cultural director by filming them singing a version of Hello Dolly to get their message across. And what was so amazing about that was, because they customized the lyrics, you can guarantee that that new leader in the community is not going to forget who they are. And so grassroots marketing is about getting yourself out there in unusual ways and making an impact so that people really are interested in getting to know more about you and your message. Okay, traditional media, we're going back to basics. Most people understand how to write a press release or create a flyer, but there's so much more that you can do that would fall under traditional media. I think that for any nonprofit, you have to constantly think about what are those opportunities that you might be missing. We get into our regular routines and we often don't stray from them. I know at many nonprofits I've been at, we say, oh, well, I send out a press release and an email blast to everybody so I can check the box for marketing and say I'm done. I think if you really truly want to be successful, you need to constantly be putting your message out into the world. And there are many ways to do that in very traditional manners. If guerrilla style has not, sometimes guerrilla marketing can be a little threatening or a little out of the comfort zone. So traditional media includes television, radio, community newsletters, newspapers, local magazine, industry reports, and so forth. I think as you define your audience, you'll know which of these traditional medias they're utilizing, and that's where you want to capitalize. So for example, one of the organizations I used to work with, Media Arts Center, put on the annual San Diego Latino Film Festival. So of course we knew we wanted to communicate through local newspapers that targeted Spanish language audiences, and we wanted to make our flyers and postcards bilingual and so forth. So the more that you understand your audience, the more that you can determine which of the marketing efforts that you want to be successful with. Okay, we talked about some tools, and I commented that Facebook and Twitter are not enough to make a campaign. So what else is out there that can help you reach your niche audience? As we explored grassroots marketing and traditional media, there's something that keeps sort of bubbling up to the surface, and that's your message needs to be more than just words. So second only to Facebook, Pinterest, for example, drives twice the referral traffic than Twitter, LinkedIn, and Google. So that means it's a powerful tool to get users to click through to your website. Now that we're experts considering dedicating time to a regular blog, we might want to consider writing the best top 10 lists or articles. We can even become a webinar instructor, right? So as you develop your understanding of new media, you need to find new ways to engage in it. And publishing regular blogs, going online and commenting to the world that's directly related to your project, and getting your message out are very important. And one of the things that we're hearing more and more about is brands. So when I hear that word, of course, my first thought is McDonald's, Apple, Coca-Cola. But let's try to reach for something more socially aware. So what do you think of when you think of the brand Red Cross? Perhaps, you know, you imagine a big red cross, and probably the ideas of saving lives and medicine come to mind. If I say Teaching for America, we're probably thinking leaders working with impoverished children. So brands are very important. So when they think of your organization or your project, coming up with those messages that go beyond text is very important. In the business world, you might think of Patagonia Sportswear as a healthy planet equals healthy business. Our Tom's shoes equals sustainability and social responsibility. So what I think that you can do as you're developing your marketing plan is also become aware of what is that brand that you want the world to know. It should be transparent. Part of a brand is making sure that things look the same. You know, do your business cards look similar to your website? Do they look similar to your postcards and flyers and your other marketing efforts? You can recognize the elements of a brand immediately, and it might include a logo, but it also could be the type of font that you use. It could be the type of layout. It could even be the type of photographs that you use. And so you want to create a transparency so everything looks the same. You want it to be unique and not blend in. Focus on what's unique about your project. If you're trying to do something about diversity, then is a picture of many different types of people effective? Possibly, but anyone and everyone who uses the word diversity is probably already imagining that. So what's unique about the diversity that you're trying to reach out to? Think about what is your special qualities of the project. Also, part of the brand is emotional content. As every good storyteller and nonprofit knows, it's the emotional connection that speaks to the core of who we are. And so it's really important to get that emotional content into your work. What do I mean by emotional content? When I'm doing video work, I often tell people who are trying to communicate their stories to use their senses. When you start including what you see, what you smell, what you hear, people can connect to that. I don't have to actually smell a rose, smell your rose, to know what roses smell like. I can emotionally make a connection. And so the senses can create that emotional bond, even though we're interacting virtually. Another way then, once you start going into the senses, is to talk about how you are feeling about the experiences that relate to your project. There's a universality. We're not alone, right? And the work that we do is something more than ourselves. And so that should be a part of your brand and message as well. How do you create something that goes beyond just a single experience? Okay, so let's just take a moment here and take a break and breathe, and go back to our earlier question. So what I see is the primary focus of people here today. 22% are project managers, 33% are both, and 44% are neither, which is very interesting. I'd be curious, for those who said neither, if they could type in the chat section and let me know what kind of, what's their primary focus. Maybe there's things that I should be saying that I'm not, and that can help me to refine this message. And let's ask another question. So, assuming that many of you are already working in marketing for your nonprofit, how many of you are working in multiple platforms? How many of you are actually using mobile content, things that appear on iPads or smartphones, that sort of thing? Does your digital message translate from device to device? Certainly, the times have gotten more savvy where your website will look great in a mobile platform. Certainly WordPress, which is commonly used not only for blogging but for individual websites or even for special project-based websites, allows for translating that look into the mobile platform. But it's important that you take a look and make sure that your marketing is coming across effectively regardless of how people are engaging visually with it. And we can expect this to expand over time. Google Glasses, which is having sort of a computer right at your eye, or now they're talking smartwatches, kind of the Dick Tracy of the future. These are going to continue to refine how do we want our visual message to appear. If people are digesting things in such small formats, we need to think about how we are getting our message across. Having a lengthy website page may not be as effective for something like Google Glass. So how do we make our messages fit how people are engaging with the new media? Great. I see that over 80% of you are actually already utilizing new platforms. So bravo. I think that that's brilliant. And how many of you think that you would have an action plan for your next project? Actually, let me just go through what an action plan consists of. And you're going to find this document in the attachments, which we'll share with you the locations later. But when I sit down, we kind of actually talked about a lot of information about what's on the web and some generalizations about the different types of audience members as well as marketing concepts. But let's try to put this into a more practical framework. And what I'd like to do is start with an action plan. I come up with what's the title of my plan and a summary. And once again, just as I did with the audience, I think, what is unique about my project? What's the hook? What's the thing I can say that's going to capture people's attention and bring importance to my message? I identify my audiences. Are they digital immigrants, digital natives? And are these the same people I'm trying to reach with my message? So who is speaking and who is listening? And where are these groups physically located? What social platforms and social media programs are they using for sources of communication, whether that be social networks, magazines, etc. And then I stop and I say, okay, the organization I'm working with is really effective at reaching this audience. So that's kind of a built-in no-brainer. But what is it that I can do? What are those key influencers that can broaden the scope and reach people that I maybe haven't reached before? And by utilizing those key influencers, how can I make that contact? Which social media programs do I use? What messages do I use? What community events do I go to, etc. And so then I'll take that next step of creating my wish list and saying, okay, in my perfect world, these are the people that would be involved. And then who can I actually reach? I'll sit down right at that point and go over some of the things you just saw on the slides for grassroots marketing, traditional media, and new media. And I have lists of all of that information, just like you saw, and I will circle the things that I think are the most effective and say that's where I'm going to put my energy. And then, of course, we're going to consider that consistent message and brand throughout the marketing efforts that we're going to do, and I'll actually take time to write down some thoughts about that. And you're going to find another attachment for today called marketing guidelines. And that's something that we'll go over in a little bit, but it's a great sort of reference tool to make sure that you're keeping consistency throughout your messaging. And one thing that's super important, and I'll probably bring it up more than once, is am I recognizing my funders and community partners with every marketing effort? You might be using a logo, an authorized statement, linking to a website. Depending upon what communication tool you're using, you might include it in the narrative, or it might be a little add-on message or comment, or it might even be a quote. So always consider how you're going to include that information into your program marketing. And last but not least is evaluation. I mean, if we don't stop and take a look at what we've done and consider it, whether or not we've been successful, we don't really learn from our experiences. So evaluation should always be built in, should always take the time, whether it's weekly, monthly, quarterly, or project-based time frame. Always make sure you include evaluation. Okay, great. I'm going to take a breather and stop here, and let's just go ahead and start up with some questions and answers. I'm going to take these concepts that we have talked about this morning, and we're going to look at real-life case studies of projects I've been involved with and how they incorporated the variety of tools and what outreach styles were successful in the marketing plan with real-world activities. So let's stop for a moment and reflect on what's been discussed. Okay. So I'm going to just go through some of the questions. Pinterest, P-I-N-I-T-E-R-E-S-T, I believe is how you spell Pinterest. It's like the word interest with the letter P in front of it. Somebody was asking about that. Somebody was asking about MySpace and if that's still around and whether or not I'd recommend it. I think if you find that your audience is actually utilizing any given social network, then you should definitely consider using it. MySpace has been around for quite some time, and so the people who are utilizing it have changed over time, and that would relate then to their key influencers and so forth. In 2013, I think there was over 36 million users on MySpace, so it's very possible that that is something that you want to consider. I see we have some fundraising individuals with us and some directors. That's great. Somebody was asking where are these webinar attachments. We'll get to that before the end of the session. I was asked, do you have the statistics of the traffic and effectiveness of each social networking site? That would be lovely. I do not, but there are many different reports available online. If you do just some general Googling, you can come across all kinds of statistics. But they always have to ask yourself, where is it coming from? The statistics that Facebook will publish on themselves might be different than a competitor. Two sources that I find are very useful is the American Library Association, ALA. They have some great reports that have been done nationally, and I can include that information in a resource list that's being attached to the webinar. Thinking there's one more that I often go to, and of course, now that I'm trying to think of it, it slipped my mind. And that's, oh, the Pew Internet surveys. Let's see. Pew Research Center Internet and American Life project at pewinternet.org. And I will just add that here to the chat session right now so that you can see that address. Entered. So Pew Research Center has done some amazing reports over the years talking about all areas of internet usage, and that would probably be a really good place to start if you're looking for where you can find statistics of the traffic and effectiveness of each social networking site. Overall, though, as I'm developing my own marketing plans and I identify the community I want to reach, most times the audience that I'm participating is local, even though the listeners may range from being local, statewide, or even national or international. I know that that initial community that I want to work with I'll actually go and talk with them and find out what they're using. If I was doing something in the high schools, you know, I would sit down with the students and I'd say, how many people are using Facebook? You know, how many people, why are you not using Facebook? Or, you know, engage them in a conversation and actually find out what it is that they're using. And that's a good gauge to reach your network effectively. Next question, what are some resources to tap into the IT world of social change and interest philanthropy? I don't think I have an answer for that one. Resources to tap into the IT world of social change and interest philanthropy. I'm going to ask that participant to refine their question, and we'll come back to that. One second. Okay. How can you gauge when it's appropriate to solicit a new audience? Well, I think that in today's world, it's always appropriate to solicit new audiences. The question really should be, how can you gauge when you're effectively reaching them? I think that for any of us, the only way that we can remain relevant and connected is to remind ourselves that even if we're a nonprofit organization, that we are a business, and it's imperative that we don't rely only on our existing user base, and that we need to continue to grow. And that means, in many cases, getting our word out to more and more people. So I like to use an example when I was doing digital storytelling and defining audience in our messaging. I knew a woman who wanted to tell a video story about her life. She had not taken care of her health, had cancer, and wanted to send a message to other women to get tested and don't make the mistakes she made, so that they wouldn't find themselves in the same situation. And she had defined her audience as other women and was telling a personal story with emotional content. And what's interesting is, even though I wasn't the target for that story, I could still relate to it because I could connect with the emotional content. And so it's okay to reach out to new audiences without having to completely retailer your message, because if you have done your work up front by including branding, consistency, emotional content, it can be heard by other audiences as well. So as you're developing your marketing plan, I think probably it would be good to stop and define who are the new audiences you would like to reach. Okay, let's take one more before we get back started. So someone had attempted to use a Kickstarter campaign to get additional support. And we're thinking about doing another Kickstarter and how to reach out to other audiences. So, well, Kickstarter is an interesting site that can help, bring in donations and so forth. It's not actually meant to be used for nonprofits, though there might be some similar services out there that can be used for nonprofits. Kickstarter specifically states that it should not be used for nonprofit work. Regardless, I know that organizations have used it, and the interesting model there is that as people give donations, they receive something, and it's usually on a scale. So if you give smaller amounts of money, you might get some benefit, but if you give larger, you may receive increased benefits. And so even if you don't use Kickstarter, it might be a model that you might want to utilize for your own fundraising efforts. As far as reaching new audiences to fundraise, I think if you use some of the same strategies you use in your marketing plan to get the message out, you can utilize those same things for community fundraising. You know, who are these people? How are they communicating? Why are they giving? What makes my program interesting to connect to that group to make them want to give? So there are some universal messages that we can learn through marketing that can be used in other areas. Okay, one moment. We're going to get back into talking heads here. So before we go into the case studies, I'd like to take a moment to talk about humanities and its importance in your projects and our lives. Through the exploration of the humanities, we learn how to think creatively and critically, to reason, and to ask questions. This exploration opens our understanding of the world and humanizes our histories. Most importantly, it gives us the tools to imagine what we hope is a better future. So as you develop your programs in marketing, consider how you are creating this rich humanities experience. A great example is right at Cal Humanities' website in the California Reads section, which I think can be used as a template for your own projects. Reading resources, discussion guides, and curriculum guides expand the scope of the humanities. I know that many of you are going to be considering veteran stories in the coming year. You can imagine how many of these three elements can expand upon the local stories you'll find as your program grows. So we're mining important stories from veterans, and in connecting them to books that have been written, maybe discussion groups that our audience can have where they're engaging with veterans, or even offering a curriculum for further educational enrichment, can really help to create a very rich experience for the individuals who are connecting with our programs. How does your project bring new community members into the organization? Not only does Cal Humanities want to lift up unheard voices from our diverse communities in California, but how does your project reach and engage those new audiences? Something that we've already been talking about, and I'd certainly say if you want to be funded in today's competitive market, you need to consider addressing how your project's going to reach outside the box. Be creative, be bold. Part of the idea here is to expand your own community base. You have a built-in community, but you want to reach beyond preaching to the choir. Sustainability requires organizations to keep opening new doors and reaching new people. Attention, interest, desire, and action. In the news industry, editors and journalists use headlines to create a hook, how they can make their story attractive to a general audience. If you take the initials here, AIDA, it's actually an advertising formula that you can use for your marketing efforts. First, you have to get your prospect's attention. That's the hook. Then you have to develop an interest in your product's benefits or results, so why it's important. Then you have to create a strong desire for those benefits or results. That's that emotional connection, right? What is it that is the value to your audience? And then you have to get the audience to take some sort of specific action. So that's, in the ideal world, this is your advertising formula. This is actually a formula that we can use in our programs and projects. Get their attention, tell them what's important, connect it to their lives, and always, always, always make sure that you have an action identified. It's one thing just to go out there and talk to people, but you also need them to take that next step, right? Whether it's giving money, telling their own stories, or learning more about a subject, you want to tell them and help them take that action. As public money shrinks, it's critical that we remember to recognize our funding partners, right? I said I would come back to this. So by accepting your grant award through Cal Humanities, you have made a commitment to acknowledge the support publicly. Cal Humanities support should be mentioned in news articles, radio interviews, and other media activities. Your work is the best advertisement for public funding that there is. Not only does the recognition bring status to your project, it helps Cal Humanities to showcase the work that they're supporting across the state of California. As you can imagine, the recognition of the partnership is crucial to help keep Cal Humanities in the public eye. If no one's aware of their participation on projects such as yours, it makes it harder for them to showcase the work they're doing across the state and secure additional funding so that we can keep all these programs going. Obviously, this is equally true for our organizations and those people who are supporting our projects. So don't forget to publicly acknowledge your funders and other partners. Okay, case study time. Okay, so the search for democracy was a project that I worked on with Media Arts Center that was funded by Cal Humanities. And actually, you'll find one of the stories on their website under Community Stories Grant. This was a project seeking to uncover how our democratic system had benefited and failed the lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer community through a series of first-person narratives recorded on video. Within this community, the local newspapers and magazines often cater to the same type of person. In this case, typically a young, white, gay man. So we wanted to make sure the program sought out diverse voices in terms of race, gender, sexual orientation, age, and as well as couples and families. In San Diego, where we're located, we're a border city. So we also hope to address issues of immigration and undocumented LGBTQ community members. Media Arts Center was the lead organization. So we started with the lowest hanging fruit. You know, who did we already know in the community that would support or benefit from partnering with us on this project? In doing so, we identified several key partners, including an educator, an activist, a journalist, a health service organization, a spoken word performance organization, and the San Diego Public Library System, all featuring great diversity, mirroring exactly what we wanted in our stories. Led by our humanities expert, we discussed the project in a brainstorming manner. So we brought everybody together, all those key people I just mentioned, along with our humanities expert, and said, okay, how can we make this project successful? So I described the parameters of the project, and we asked our group many questions. What were we seeking to do? What parts of the community did we believe were unrepresented? How would we identify participants? Especially if they're unrepresented, how would we actually get them to participate? How could we find them? How would we keep certain individuals safe from retribution? When you're talking about immigration and undocumented individuals, we had to be very careful about what was being on film. And when and how could we best present these stories? Because we all have different internet connections, webinars are not always the best place to actually watch videos. So here and in the resources document that we'll be sharing with you, there's some links to actually some of these stories so you can see how some of these things came out in the real world. So Dr. Washington was our humanities expert, and what we did was we had her create a video to bring a perspective to all of these individual stories that you might hear during the program. And then I've also included a link to one of the stories, which is also the one that you'll see on Cal Humanities site, by Trace Watson, and he talks about his own experience about democracy and equality. So we decided to take a grassroots marketing element into our outreach. And what we did was we chose to create a video commercial that could be shown in local bars and community centers to capture people's attention to participate. We, as I had mentioned, one of our individuals was a spoken word group, and so we held a LGBTQ event of spoken word where people could come and talk about the issues of democracy and equality. We held a community event during Gay Pride to engage people, and we held a culminating viewing with speakers from the community who had participated at the local library. So those are some out-of-the-box ideas that we did for marketing. On a traditional route, we did press releases to targeted community newspapers and magazines. We did postcards that went directly into the bars and community centers that we knew the LGBTQ community were supporting. And in terms of new media, we found that Facebook, YouTube, Flickr, a specialized section of our website, developing content for our partners' websites, and email campaigns all fit into how we could reach our community virtually. And so Facebook, of course, we were doing regular messaging to our audience. YouTube, we were posting the videos. Flickr, that's a photo social media tool. So we had events and we put all our images online of those events. And then, of course, I think websites and email campaigns are rather self-explanatory. So in terms of a brand, right, one of the first things we want is transparency and recognizable. So we made sure that we wanted to include the rainbow and American flags, that we showcased diverse faces, and that we highlighted community, some of which you can see here. As far as what made our project unique in terms of a brand, democracy through the lens of our LGBTQ community. The emotional content was within each story, the personal stories of the individuals that participated. So, undocumented immigrant that could be sent home to a country that would send him to jail or work camps or worse. A same-sex couple whose rights and protections were not equal to their straight counterparts. This was before many of the marriage laws have passed, and so forth. We found that each of our participants had something not only personal to say, but something that emotionally connected to the greater audience. And the universal part is that these were not stories about people somewhere generically over there. These were people about our collective story. So we made sure, especially with our humanities expert, to weave in the fact that this is a part, every story is a part of the fabric of our greater community. Okay, I just want to note that it is almost noon. We started about 10 minutes late, so I'm going to continue on. For those of you who have to leave, thank you very much for participating. You can expect to find some follow-up from Cal Humanities with more information. And for those of you who are staying, thank you. I appreciate you staying, and I hope that the case studies are going to help highlight the things that we've been talking about and create some venue for you to find real-world uses of my webinar today. So California of the Past is another project I was instrumentally involved in. It was a statewide project and took me to the far reaches of California. I worked with the Hoopa Valley Indians in Northern California. I worked with mid-state farm workers and coastal sports fishermen, but probably the most powerful and enlightened projects for me in this project were the stories and the individuals I got to work with that highlighted Japanese American experiences of internment and veteran service during World War II. Laguna Woods, which is a town that is, it used to be a retirement community and then finally actually incorporated into a real city. It's an elder community. And they were focusing on stories of people over 100 years old, and as well as veteran stories of World War II. And it was very fascinating and provided the community an opportunity to publicly share their first-person stories. It's amazing how many older people within our community have these rich and amazing stories and lives, and yet their own families and their own neighbors and friends have heard the stories that are not interested, and yet we can all be enriched by hearing them within the community. As that community is aging out, if we don't get those stories recorded and preserved, they could be lost to time. So this was a state library project, and each community had its own personal project, our area of focus. And I'll explain a little bit of what occurred beyond the library walls, hopefully, as I go along here. So I've got some more video references here. Let me just ask a quick question. How many of you are planning to participate in Cal Humanities Community Stories War Comes Home, which is the Veterans Project? So got that live. So I want to just briefly mention two things here. The Veterans History Project, which is part of the Library of Congress, is a wonderful national resource where you can, if you are doing veterans work, you can put your information there as well. Almost any sort of community stories work you're doing can also probably connect to StoryCorps. And so I highly recommend that you look into that. Just keep in mind that these organizations have their own sets of rules and regulations. The Veterans History Project is actually oral histories, and so they're looking for long formats. In today's world, things are getting shorter and shorter in terms of attention span, and so the California of the Past project, Mead Kibbe here was a really long video at over 6 minutes. We tried to keep them down to 3 minutes. And so those were not necessarily able to fit into like Veterans History Project. But the work that we did in Laguna Woods was longer format, and so you will be able to find them there. I think they're important archival spots, and they're really good sources of inspiration. So if you're doing veterans work, check out StoryCorps, check out Veterans History Project. You might find some ideas there that you didn't come up with on your own. Two more stories that I think you'd be interested in looking at. You can see one of the oral histories from Laguna Woods. It is long, it's 21 minutes long, but that did fit the Veterans History Project rules and regulations. And I also have here a video from the Japanese American Citizens League in Watsonville, Santa Cruz. So there, the Japanese American Citizens League wanted to capture stories from their community who was aging out, and they also met with their humanities expert, Franz, who had a really compelling story to talk about the 44nd, and which was a troop of Japanese Americans in World War II and their service to the country. I know that Media Arts Center San Diego has recently entered into a project documenting the stories of the first African American Marines. It's especially interesting because a series of history lectures about the men and their service are being held at one of our local libraries, Malcolm X Library, which is in an African American community. And a local middle school there is also participating, and the students are acting as videographers and interviewers. And so what happens is that project is becoming cross-generational. It's building a sense of cultural identity. History is being looked at from a social and a first-person perspective. And so these are the kinds of rich humanities experiences that were brought to a program that I think are compelling for a program. And you want to think about, you know, not just capturing stories, but how does that fit into really enriching the lives of your community. Okay, so on California of the Past, our partners with that program were historical societies, local government bodies, business community members, high schools, and even local authors and historians. So you can really bring a richness through utilizing partners that are available in your community. So for grassroots marketing, we had a presence at seasonal cultural and organizational events, such as the Japanese American Citizen League. They would have special seasonal events, and we were able to participate with our project there. Government and business association speaking engagements. We actually went into town hall meetings, did presentations, went to Rotary clubs, Lions clubs, and told them about this important work and got them involved. Many times the business association is a great source that we forget, who can provide some funding or sponsorship for events and projects, so don't forget them. Community theatrical presentations, we were also included, as well as I had mentioned, Media Arts Center is connected with a film festival, so we did trailers for our projects that were able to be seen by audience members. And then at the end of the project, we created a DVD compilation and recommended reading list. Traditional media, community calendars, press releases, targeted community newspapers, bulletin boards, bookmarks, and flyers. And in new media, we did electronic community bulletin boards, public access television, touch screen video displays, and a school system website. Okay, I'm just going to go quickly now here through and wrap things up. Here's some ideas of branding and making sure things have a similarity, recognizable and transparent look. Local angle, emotional content was Americans targeted unconstitutionally and the emotional upheaval of being ostracized and removed from their communities. Universal aspect was a vigilance to protect our constitutional rights. In fact, the Japanese American community were the first to speak up when politicians began discussing terrorism and Guantanamo and how to deal with Muslim Americans. So important stuff. Okay, on this slide you'll see some of the resources we were talking about. The marketing examples from California of the past shows you a wide variety of what communities did to create their branding. The guidelines, which I didn't get to, which I definitely think you should take a look. It just includes some very basic information, statements that you want to repeat, and how you incorporate your partners. The webinar resource list, things that I've mentioned today are all listed there with web links. And then I created a step-by-step action plan for you so that you can actually take those steps, and I had gone over that document earlier with you. Cal Humanities will send an evaluation of this webinar for you as well. Okay, so we looked at how to identify your audience, some of the social networking and online tools to grow your community. We looked at the difference between grassroots marketing, traditional media, and new media, and then very briefly went through some case studies and how that all came together. Oops, I'm sorry. So let me get back to where we were. So close. Okay, we'll take a, it's already 12:10. I guess I'll go until 12:15 if that's all right. And we will just see if there's any questions and answers here. And then I will pass the reins back over to Cal Humanities to wrap up the webinar. So let me take a quick look at questions and see if we had any here in relationship to the case studies. Assessment tools. If we do not have a budget to hire outside firms to do this, how do we assess our marketing success in tools? Well, I think that I'll definitely pass along my email address, and you can follow up with me directly as well as Cal Humanities. And this is something that I can take a look into. I didn't do any research for this webinar on the assessment tools, but we certainly can use some practical thought there and say, as you're developing the outcomes of your project. You can tie those outcomes with what you would consider to be a successful assessment. So, for example, if I wanted to, in our equality stories, we certainly were reaching the LGBTQ community for participating, but we wanted to get a message out to a greater audience, and so part of the assessment tools was to define how effective were we actually at reaching that audience. Where did we put the marketing messages? Where did we hold the community events? How many people attended? How many people engaged in the conversation, and so forth. When you're trying to develop new audiences, of course, that's an unknown. So maybe you set a goal of, oh, well, it would be great if 50 people showed up to an event, or that we received, daily engagement on Facebook with audience members about such and such. So just on a practical point, I would say that you can incorporate assessment tools as such. I guess I should probably pass it back over to Cal Humanities at this point, and I will go through and see if there's other questions I can answer remotely via email. Felicia, are you still with us?
Yep. Thank you so much, Patrick. I mean, this is really just been a wonderful amount of important and valuable and interesting information. I know I certainly learned a huge amount from your presentation, and I'm sure other people did and will really benefit from this. So thank you so much for doing this. As Patrick said, everyone, if you would like to follow up with him directly about any of the information that was presented today, or if you have specific questions, feel free to get in touch with him at this email. Again, I just want to remind everyone about the upcoming deadline for community stories. It's February 18th. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. And again, application and other pertinent information materials are all on our website at this link. We look forward, hopefully, to seeing your proposals, if not this round, maybe in the future. I also did just want to make everyone aware that we previously hosted a webinar on evaluation. So if you're interested in that topic, you can also find a link to that at this webpage, as well as the link to the recording of this webinar. Okay, so thank you all, and I'll turn this back to Angelica.
Thank you, everybody, for attending. Again, we'll be sending a follow-up email tomorrow, which will include a link to the survey, which we definitely like your feedback on, and also the links to the attachments that Patrick had mentioned in his presentation, and also the recording of this webinar, which you'll also find on our YouTube page shortly. Thanks again, and feel free to stay on for any questions that you might have that you'd want to post to Patrick in these last few minutes. Otherwise, we'll hear from you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks so much.